Today's psalm is, to me, one of the most beautiful, strange, evocative, yearning poems in the Bible. It's a personal favorite. And part of the spell it casts, I think, has to do with its kind of suspended location in time. It begins with this nostalgic look into the past. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, then were we like those who dream. Then was our mouth filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. But soon it turns toward the future. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the watercourses of the Negev. So the psalm is situated in that dark in-between place of God's absence. It's reaching both backward and forward for something to hang on to. It remembers God at work in the past and hopes for God to show up again in the future, but the present is a time of grief and loss and longing for restoration. And then there's this line, which seems to sum up and deepen the psalm all in one sentence. Those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Do you hear that? It's not that the tears pass away and joy replaces them. It's not that the tears fall and dry up and then the sun comes out. It's that the tears water the seeds of joy. They result in joy. They give way to joy. It seems to me there's something very wise in this language, that current suffering itself gives rise to future gladness. Does that resonate for you? Perhaps you can look back on a time of despair and darkness, a time when God seemed absent and all about you was devastation. And yet somehow that very devastation turned out to be the seedbed for blessing. A setback that showed you your strength. An addiction that taught you how deeply you need God. A failure that made you a more kind and humble person. A loss that deepened your compassion for the losses of others. Maybe you've lived long enough to have planted tears that have given rise to joy, or if not joy, a very deep kind of blessing. Or maybe in your life right now, you find that you are simply in a time of tears. The door to some light-filled past is closed, and you cannot see a future to step into. Maybe you're feeling torn by a divorce, or have lost a job, or are just struggling to put one foot in front of the other. And it's hard to see that any harvest of joy can ever come from these bitter tears. The past is clearly never coming back. So you wonder what it even means for those who sow with tears to reap with songs of joy. How is that even possible? I did a Lenten series years ago at a former church in which we watched a film called The Power of Forgiveness. This documentary told the story of two men who found a bond in common tragedy. The son of one man had been delivering pizzas to help pay for college when he was shot and killed by the son of the other man. Now, I don't know how you go on as either of those parents to lose a child to such stupid violence, or to have a child commit that violence and go to prison. I don't know how you cope. with such a devastation. But the father of the victim was a prayerful person. And somehow he came to see that, as he put it, there were victims on both ends of the gun. So he reached out to the father of the other. Gradually, the two men reconciled and became friends. And then they started going around to schools to give talks about forgiveness together. They'd go into some pretty rough districts in the LA area, places where kids didn't necessarily see a lot of alternatives to violence for managing conflict. The teacher or principal would introduce the two men like this: this man's son killed this man's son. And you could see the kids' mouths drop open, because there were these two fathers standing together as friends. This man's son killed this man's son. Those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Not that you would choose the tears, not that you would ever choose the tragedy, but that the tragedy can be transformed into its own unique kind of gift. That's the promise wrapped up in the dream of today's psalm. It's a perfect message for this season of Advent, which also marks a bleak in-between time of God's absence. The days are literally darkening, and liturgically, the Messiah is not yet come. God has restored the fortunes of Zion in the past, leading the Israelites from slavery to freedom, bringing the Babylonian exiles back to the promised land in our passage from Isaiah. But now, things are dark again, in the Bible, in the world. We're waiting for the light of Christ. We're watering dry soil with our tears. With all of this talk of planting, I've been thinking, if we assigned flowers to Christian seasons the way states adopt them as symbols or mascots, which flower would we give to Advent? I'm no botanist, but I would nominate fireweed. The seeds of this plant lie dormant under forest floors for years. But as soon as major destruction strikes, fireweed comes alive. You'll see it carpeting the charred valleys left behind by forest fires, or spreading across landscapes ruined by oil spills. And what else but Advent purple? In World War II, the British called it bombweed because it was the first plant to appear in the burnt-out craters of bombs. It's a sign that life is on its way back, a pledge that God will do a new thing in the midst of this devastation, a promise that those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Amen.